The Man Who Stopped Running, Real-Life Story. For a long time, Héctor believed that calm was a privilege reserved for other people, those born into stable families, those who hadn't had to start over from scratch again and again, those who hadn't learned to live with the constant feeling that everything could fall apart. Héctor learned early on to move, not to stay. His childhood was a succession of moves, his mother's temporary jobs, schools he never got to finish. He learned not to get attached, not to promise, not to trust too much. Every time something started to feel safe, something broke. That's how his resilient, practical, distrustful character was formed. As an adult, he turned that defense mechanism into what looked like a virtue. He became an excellent corporate crisis consultant. He would arrive when everything was falling apart, reorganize, make tough decisions, and leave before the place could start to feel like home. He was good, very good, but he was always passing through. Héctor said he liked freedom. In reality, he was afraid of standing still. One day he received a different kind of offer. It wasn't the best pay or the biggest project, but it had something unusual. There was no short deadline. The company was going through a deep transformation and needed stability, not just quick results. Héctor hesitated. Accepting meant staying. It meant getting involved. In the end, he accepted more out of exhaustion than conviction. The company was located in a small town, surrounded by nature. Nothing spectacular, nothing chaotic. That was precisely what made him uncomfortable. Everything seemed too orderly. From day one, he noticed the problem wasn't technical. It was human. People were exhausted, resentful, disconnected from one another. Héctor did what he always did. He structured processes, cut excess, imposed clear rules. It worked halfway. The results improved, but the atmosphere worsened. One afternoon, after a tense meeting, a woman from the team approached him. Her name was Irene. She wasn't confrontational, but she wasn't submissive either. "You're very good at fixing systems," she told him. "But you don't see people." Héctor felt irritated. "I'm not paid to see people. I'm paid to make this work." Irene looked at him calmly. "Things work when the people holding them together aren't breaking inside." Héctor didn't respond, but something shifted. That night he walked aimlessly. The town was quiet, too quiet. No noise, no urgency. For the first time in a long while, he had nowhere to run. And that's when the real discomfort appeared. He began to realize something he had always avoided. Not everything that hurts comes from the outside. Some wounds stay open because we refuse to look at them. He remembered every time he had left too soon. Every project finished without goodbyes, every relationship abandoned just as it was starting to matter. He had built an efficient life, but not a whole one. In the days that followed, Héctor began to observe more and impose less. Not because he had become soft, but because he understood something essential. True strength isn't about controlling the environment. It's about governing yourself. He began to listen, to accept mistakes, to acknowledge limits. He discovered he didn't need to be in constant motion to be valuable. The team changed. Not immediately, but genuinely. For the first time, Héctor stayed. Weeks passed, then months, and the urge to leave was still there, but it no longer ruled him. One day, Irene asked him something simple. "What would happen if this time you didn't run?" Héctor didn't know how to answer. That night he felt vulnerable again, but he no longer experienced it as a threat, rather as a sign. Maybe life wasn't asking him to run or to resist anymore, but to inhabit who he was. The company was better. So was he. But something important still wasn't resolved, something internal, old, silent. Héctor thought that after deciding to stay, the hardest part was over. But staying physically didn't mean staying inwardly. The days began to weigh on him, not because of the work, he had mastered that, but because of the silence which now had space to speak. Without airports, without impersonal hotels, without packed suitcases, his mind began to bring back everything he had left behind. Memories that once couldn't touch him now sat across from him. His father, absent for almost his entire childhood. His mother, exhausted, always solving problems, never stopping to ask how he was doing. The times he promised to return and didn't. The times he chose to leave before someone could disappoint him or need him. Héctor began to sleep poorly. He dreamed he was in train stations without knowing which one to board, that someone was calling his name, but when he turned around there was no one there. At work, even though everything was moving forward, he began to tense up. He demanded too much of himself, grew irritated over minor details. He couldn't stand making mistakes because, to him, a mistake had always meant moving on again. Irene noticed. "You're not running," she told him one afternoon. "But you're still on guard." Héctor clenched his jaw. "It's the only way I know not to lose everything." Irene gently shook her head. "Not everything is lost when you let go. Sometimes it's lost when you hold on too tight." That sentence stayed with him all day. That night, Héctor received a call he wasn't expecting. A former company was offering him a large, urgent, well-paid project. Exactly the kind of offer he always accepted. Exactly the perfect excuse to leave without explanations. He hung up and felt something like relief mixed with guilt. For the first time, running didn't feel like freedom. It felt like betraying something that was just beginning. The following days were a constant internal battle. No one pressured him. No one knew about the offer. But he felt the weight of the decision in his chest. Staying meant facing his history. Leaving meant repeating it. In a meeting, a young employee made a mistake in a key report. In the past, Héctor would have corrected him sharply. This time, he listened. He saw the fear in the young man's eyes, the same fear he had carried as a child, the fear of failing and having that mean abandonment. Something inside him broke, gently. After the meeting, Héctor locked himself in his office. For the first time, he accepted an uncomfortable truth. He hadn't left so many times because the world was unstable, but because he had never learned how to hold himself steady. He remembered an idea he had once read in passing, but which now made sense. Life doesn't become solid when everything is under control, but when you learn to live according to who you are, not according to what you're afraid of losing. That night, Héctor walked to the edge of town. He sat on a simple bench, unhurried. He let the cold reach him. He didn't resist it. He breathed. He stayed. And he understood something essential. He had spent his life reacting to circumstances when the only thing he could truly govern was his inner disposition. The next morning, Irene found an envelope on her desk. It wasn't a resignation, nor was it an escape. It was a decision. But its exact contents have not yet been revealed, because Héctor is right at the point where coherence is tested, where choosing well is costly, where virtue stops being an idea and becomes action. Héctor didn't sleep the night he left the envelope on the desk, not because he doubted what he had written, but because for the first time he wasn't running from the weight of a decision. He stayed awake, breathing calmly, accepting discomfort as part of the path. The next morning, Irene was the first to arrive. She read the envelope in silence. She didn't smile right away. She looked up at him the way someone looks at a person who has just crossed an invisible threshold. "You're staying," she said, more as a statement than a question. Héctor nodded. "Not because it's easy. Because it's right." It was the first time he had used that word without irony. Right. Not profitable. Not safe. Not convenient. Right. He rejected the outside offer that same day. When he hung up the phone, Héctor felt a brief emptiness, as if he had let go of a rope he had been clinging to for years. But the emptiness didn't consume him. It turned into space. And in that space, something began to grow. The following months weren't perfect. The company went through painful adjustments, decisions not everyone celebrated. There were losses, arguments, mistakes. But this time, Héctor didn't respond from rigidity or from the impulse to escape. He responded from clarity. He learned to say, "I don't know," without feeling ashamed, to ask for help without feeling weak, to correct without humiliating, to hold uncomfortable conversations without building walls. The team changed, but not out of fear, out of trust. And the company began to flourish in a different way, less spectacular, more solid. One afternoon, Héctor received a message from his mother. They didn't speak often. There were never reproaches, but there was no closeness either. The message was simple: "I dreamed about you. You were calm. It gave me peace." Héctor read those words several times. He felt a lump in his throat, not because they resolved the past, but because he no longer needed them to. He had learned that not everything that was broken has to be repaired in order to live with dignity. One weekend, Irene invited him to walk along a nearby trail. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. Silence was no longer an enemy. "You used to think staying meant losing freedom," she said. "And now I understand that running meant losing myself," he replied. It wasn't a dramatic confession. It was a serene acknowledgement. Over time, Héctor stopped being a crisis consultant and became something he had never been before, a reference point. Not because of charisma, but because of coherence. People trusted him because they knew he didn't react from fear, because they knew he wouldn't leave at the first tremor. And most importantly, Héctor began to trust himself. He didn't need to change his past or justify his wounds. He simply learned to live in accordance with who he was, without fighting reality or submitting to it, accepting what he couldn't control and firmly exercising the only thing he could, his character. One night, as he was closing the office, he paused for a moment. There was no rush, no urge to leave. He looked around and felt something he had never felt anywhere before: belonging. Not because the place was perfect, but because he was no longer running from himself. Héctor finally understood that true stability is not external. Life doesn't become secure when everything fits together, but when you learn to stand upright in the middle of what doesn't. And so, without noise, without applause, without grand promises, he won. Not a race. Not recognition. But something much harder: the ability to stay and to live in peace. Are you interested in Stoicism, personal growth, and life stories? Then subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos. And don't forget to follow us on all our social media platforms to stay connected with our community. Join the family of Stoic Stories.